In this video, we're going to cover practice questions and strategies to help you with reading comprehension so you can pass GED RLA faster and move ahead with your life to college or a better job, whatever your goal is, and hopefully get yourself and your family in a little better situation. So I'm going to start by reading the passages, and I always say this in my videos when I'm doing reading. If I'm reading too fast for you, please pause the video, take your time, and read at a rate that's going to make sense to you. Alright, so to begin. There were only 2 Americans stopping at the hotel. They did not know any of the people they passed on the stairs on their way to and from their room. Their room was on the 2nd floor facing the sea. It also faced the public garden and the War Monument. There were big palms and green benches in the public garden. Okay, so the first question here is, what's the setting of the story? So I'd like you to pause the video, try to answer this question, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so the answer here is a hotel, and we're not really sure exactly where it is, but so far we're going to assume probably that it's not in America because it's pointing out that there's only 2 Americans stopping at the hotel, and it tells us that it's on the 2nd floor facing the sea, and that there's a garden and a war monument. So as long as you got something like that, as long as you knew it was in a hotel, then you probably got the right answer here. And this is just an important point that I want to make here. Whenever you're reading a story, whether it's just in your personal life or especially for the GED, one of the first things you always want to try to do is to try to figure out the setting. And the setting just tells you where the story takes place, and it also tells you when. Here, we're not really sure when exactly. In fact, we don't really know even specifically where it is other than the details I covered here. But figuring out the setting is a really important thing to do because you might get a direct question asking you, where's the setting of the story? But also it's going to help you form a mental picture in your head as you're going throughout the story. Okay, so we keep going here. In the good blank, there was always an artist with his easel. Artists liked the way the palms grew in the bright colors of the hotels facing the gardens and the sea. Italians came from a long way off to look up at the War Monument. It was of bronze and glistened in the rain. It was raining. The rain dripped from the palm trees. Okay, so the first question about this passage is, which word most likely fits in the blank? So you've got multiple choice answers here. I'd like you to pause the video and just use your critical thinking skills. Just practice thinking which word would make the most sense in this blank, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so the correct answer here is weather, and hopefully you've noticed that it's raining. It's told us several times that it's raining, so that's kind of a clue here that maybe this has something to do with weather here. And this is just one of those things in the good clocks, in the good remote, in the good buildings. Possibly building is going to be the answer here. So if you thought buildings, maybe that could make sense here. But the answer is weather, and again, you just want to realize that it's raining here. It's mentioned that it's raining several times, and hopefully you would come to the conclusion that weather is the right answer. Okay, so it goes on to say, water stood in pools on the gravel paths. The sea broke in a long line in the rain and slipped back down the blank to come up and break again in a long line in the rain. The motor cars were gone from the square by the War Monument. Across the square in the doorway of the cafe, a waiter stood looking out at the empty square. So the question here is, which word best fits in the blank here? So I'd like you to pause the video, try to figure this out, and then as always, we'll go over it. Okay, so the correct word here is beach, and so I want you to look at all the words that have something to do with water here, right? There's sea, there's rain, and if we look at the multiple choice answers here, pilots, shirt, and wallet, well, these things don't have to do with water necessarily, and so beach has to do with water because a beach is where there's sand and there's water to swim in, whether it's a lake or an ocean, and so hopefully you would come to the conclusion here that beach is the correct answer. Okay, so next it says, the American wife stood at the window looking out. Outside, right under their window, a cat was crouched under one of the dripping green tables. The cat was trying to make herself so compact that she would not be dripped on. So the question here, based on what you know so far, do you think the cat is likely to play a major or a minor role in the story? So pause the video now, think about this. It's either A or B, it's a 50-50, it's a coin flip. So pause the video, think about this, and we'll go over it. Okay, so let me go over this, and I just want to be clear here. When I'm talking about a major role, I mean, is the cat going to play a big part in the story, or is it just going to be a little detail that is just mentioned maybe once or twice but doesn't really impact the story? If it doesn't really have much of an impact, we would say it's a minor role. If it's going to play a big role and be a central part of the story, we'd say it's a major role. And I'm thinking here that the cat is going to play a major role, so hopefully you thought that too. Hopefully you picked A here. And the reason is because, number one, okay, the cat appears in the title. So that's always a good practice. In fact, this is something that I wish people would do more right when they get to the passages on the test, especially when that time's ticking down. It gets a little stressful, so a lot of people just skim over the titles that are given to you. But the title of the passage often has helpful information. So hopefully you noticed here that this passage is called The Cat in the Rain. And let this just be a reminder to you on the test that in many cases the passage titles will give you a clue to one of the questions or to one of the answers. All right, this isn't always the case, but just a reminder here before you start reading, always look at the title and ask yourself, do I know anything about this topic already? It's just helpful to watch for places where words in the title show up too. Like here, the word cat appeared in the title, and then we see that a cat appears in the story, so that might be a clue to pay attention to the cat character. All right, so let's keep moving here. So the next part goes, I'm going down and get that kitty, the American wife said. I'll do it, her husband offered from the bed. No, I'll get it, the poor kitty out trying to keep dry under a table. The husband went on reading, lying propped up with the two pillows at the foot of the bed. Don't get wet, he said. So here's your question. Which of the following literary devices is this part of the story an example of? A, dialogue, B, metaphor, or C, onomatopoeia? And if you're not sure what any of these is, just try your best and we're going to go over it and hopefully you'll learn something. So pause the video, try it out, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so the correct answer here is A, dialogue, and dialogue is just any kind of conversation between two or more people. It could really be a character talking out loud to themselves too, but the point of dialogue is that you're going to know that there's dialogue in the story because you're going to see quotations, you're going to see quotes around the text, and dialogue gives us deeper insight into the plot and the characters. And in many cases, again, there's no guarantee here, but in many cases, you'll probably get at least one question from a part of a story that has dialogue and talking. So the talking scenes in the stories on your real test are going to be important to pay attention to because there's a good chance you'll get at least one or two questions that the answers are in the part of the text where there's talking. Again, nobody knows for certain because the tests are randomized, but that's just a good bet. So the next question here, who is speaking in the highlighted sentence? And I've highlighted the sentence that I'm talking about here on the screen in yellow. So I'd like you to pause the video and tell me who is speaking here. Is it the wife or the husband? So try it now, and then we'll go over it. So here is what I like to call, a sandwich here. And the point is that the quote here is sandwiched between two lines that tell us that the husband is speaking, right? It says, I'll do what her husband offered from the bed. And then if you skip the highlighted quote, the next quote, it says, don't get wet, he said. All right, so sandwiched in between her husband and he said is the quote right there. And since it doesn't tell us that the husband was speaking this and the quote appears in between two direct mentions that the husband is speaking, then we can conclude that it's the wife speaking. And so making sure that you understand who is speaking and who is saying what is just an important skill. So hopefully you got that right, and if not, hopefully you learned something. So the story goes on to say, the wife went downstairs and the hotel owner stood up and bowed to her as she passed the office. His desk was at the far end of the office. He was an old man and very tall. He stood behind his desk in the far end of the dim room. Okay, so the next question, if you had to pick one word to remember each of the following characters, what word would you pick? There's no right or wrong answer to this. I just want you to try your best. So for the wife, the husband, and the hotel owner, come up with just one word for each character that would help you remember that character. So pause the video, try this out, and then we'll go over it. So Losing track of the different characters is a common reason that people struggle with reading comprehension, and this happens to me sometimes when I do my own personal reading and I read fiction on my own sometimes for fun whenever I get time, which unfortunately isn't as much as I'd like nowadays, but that's just life, I guess. But it's hard to juggle a bunch of different characters in your head, all right, especially when you get to 7 or 8 or 9 different people. So one good strategy is to just pause and just every time you learn something new about a character or every time you get to a point where you feel like you understand a little bit about that character's role in the story, I just want you to just stop and just think, how can I remember the story? Sorry, how can I remember this character here? All right, and one good way to do it is just to think in one word, how can I remember what this character does, or how can I keep this character separate from the others? And it might be helpful to think of something that's as visual as possible. And let me show you what I mean. So for this, you probably have 3 different words than me, but these are the words I picked. I picked for the wife the word caring, and for the husband I picked reading. And I came up with reading for the husband simply because it said that he's in the bed reading. So from now on, if I forget who the husband is or I forget what his role is, I can form that mental picture of him with that book in hand, and that's going to help me tell the husband apart from the hotel owner and the wife. And the hotel owner, so we don't have that much that we are told about him yet, but one thing that it tells us is that he's tall. So to keep him straight from the husband, whenever the hotel owner comes up in the story here, I can just remember that he's a tall person. I can picture him being the tallest character in the story, all right? You could also picture him, behind a desk. I know that would be more than one word, but it says that he's standing behind the desk, so you can just remember that. And the reason why I said caring might not be the best word to remember the wife by is because when you think of the word caring, does it bring a clear picture to your head? Maybe, maybe not so much, compared to reading. You can picture someone holding a book, or tall, you can see someone as tall. But that was what I came up with, so that works. Anything you came up with here is acceptable, even a word like caring. My suggestion would just be to try to always think of something that's going to give you a clear mental picture for each character. This is really kind of like a power tip. I've never heard anywhere else. This is something that I've started teaching students to do, and I just think that this is going to be helpful. So if you're not a visual person, you don't have to use that trick if you don't like it, but for people that are very visual, like myself, I think it's a good way to keep characters straight. So we keep going here. It says, the wife liked him. She liked the deadly serious way he received any complaints. She liked his dignity. She liked the way he wanted to serve her. She liked the way he thought about being a hotel keeper. She liked his old, heavy face and big hands. So the question here is, and this is more of an exercise versus a question. It doesn't end in a question mark, but it says, identify the main idea and at least one supporting idea from this paragraph. So pause the video, try your best with this, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so first of all, if you're not sure what a main idea is, just know that the main idea is just the biggest or most important point of a paragraph. It's usually found in one sentence, and it's most often going to be the first sentence in the paragraph traditionally, but not always. And if you're not sure what the main idea is, just look for repetition if there's a reoccurring idea throughout that paragraph. And a good way to think about that too would be to read a paragraph and just think, what title would I give this paragraph? If I had to put a name on this, what would it be? All right, and so as far as supporting ideas go, supporting ideas are just ideas that support that main idea. And these are going to be things like facts and examples. And so basically, what I was asking you to do is come up with the main idea and one specific, one supporting idea, at least one. And the main idea here is that she liked him, right? So remember, the main idea is just the big, central, general idea in the paragraph. It's often found in one sentence, often found in the first sentence here. And then all the other sentences here are topic sentences, or I'm sorry, all the other sentences here are supporting ideas. All right, the topic sentence would be the wife liked him, also known as the main idea here in this paragraph, and the supporting details would be everything here. So any other sentence you picked, like for example, she liked his old heavy face and big hands. So anything that's an example of how or why she likes him, I would say is a supporting idea here. And this is really a part of a reading strategy that I made a video on this. you're welcome to watch that video. I'm not going to rehash the whole video here, but one really powerful reading strategy that you can take with you for fiction and really nonfiction, even social studies, really the whole test, is the RAP paraphrasing method. And RAP stands for, the R stands for read the paragraph, the A stands for ask what's the main idea and two supporting ideas, then the P stands for put it in your own words. And so to use this strategy, as you're reading on the test or especially as you're practicing, you just pause every now and then, make sure that you understand what you're reading. You think, what was the main idea here and what were two supporting ideas? And then you just put it in your own words. And you don't want to spend too much time doing this, obviously, or you'll run out of time. But the more you practice, the more you'll find that you can probably do this in a short enough time that it's not going to take up too much time on your test. And the benefit is that you're going to understand the passage more deeply, and then if you understand it more deeply, you'll be able to get more questions right and hopefully get a higher score more easily, all right? So my next question for you is, why do you think the author is mentioning that she likes him multiple times here? Now, there's no right or wrong answers to this. I just want to know what you think. I just want you to think critically. Why do you think that the author keeps mentioning this? So pause the video, try this out, and then we'll go over this. Okay, here, so really, I was just thinking to really drive the point home. So it's not clear here. Does she like him romantically? It kind of seems like she might here, but it doesn't come out and say that. But she definitely likes him. She's definitely interested. Either she likes him as a friend, she likes him as more than a friend, which I hope she doesn't because she has a husband, obviously. But that's what the author might seem to be suggesting here. It's not 100% clear, but I think that the inference from this is that maybe she does like him or have a bit of a crush on him. Like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. I just wanted you to think about this, right? And the bigger takeaway point from this question here is that, in most cases, a writer is not going to take up time and take up space in their story to give you details that don't matter, especially when you see repetition like this. Like it's saying she liked him, she liked this, she liked that, over and over again, she liked, she liked, she liked. So the writer obviously did this when he wrote the story for a very specific reason. He didn't just do this by chance. And so it's always a good practice to just ask yourself, why would the writer tell me this? Why would the writer want to put this information in? And it's just to get you thinking critically here. All right, so it goes on to say, liking him, she opened the door and looked out. It was raining harder. A man in a rubber cape was crossing the empty square to the cafe. The cat would be around to the right. Perhaps she could go along under the eaves. So my next question for you here is about the word eaves. The word eaves most likely means which of the following? A, the night before holidays. B, listening in on someone's conversation. Or C, a part of the roof. So pause the video, try to figure out what you think that word means, and then we'll go over it. So basically, the answer here is C, a part of the roof, and you can tell because it says that she's going underneath something. So you wouldn't go underneath a night before a holiday, and you can't go underneath someone's conversation, but you can go underneath a part of a roof, all right? And so that's how you would hopefully figure out that C is the right answer. And if you didn't get this one, don't worry. There'll be more questions throughout this, so you can hopefully redeem yourself. So it goes on to say, as she stood in the doorway, an umbrella opened behind her. It was the maid who looked after their room. You must not get wet, she smiled, speaking Italian. Of course, the hotel keeper had sent her. So my next question for you would be, why do you think the author included the last sentence? Of course, the hotel keeper had sent her. So I'd like you to pause the video and brainstorm at least two possibilities. You can do it in your head or write it down. Either way is fine, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so there's, again, not really a right or wrong answer here. But the writer, again, obviously chose to say, of course, the hotel keeper had sent it for a reason. So maybe it's that he likes the wife too. Maybe romantically he has a crush on the wife back. Or maybe he was just trying to give good service, and maybe he was just thinking and paying attention to her as a customer and figured that she was going out and wanted to give her an umbrella. So it could also just have been he's just being a good hotel manager. He's just doing something by paying attention to her and just noticing her need. So, or it could also be romantic. We're not sure. That's why there's no right or wrong answer here. I just wanted you to think about it. Okay, so it goes on to say, with the maid holding the umbrella over her, she walked along the gravel path until she was under their window. The table was there, washed bright green in the rain, but the cat was gone. She was suddenly blank. The maid looked up at her. "There was a cat," said the American girl. "A cat?" the maid laughed. "A cat in the rain?" "Yes," she said, "under the table." "Then, oh, I wanted it so much. I wanted a kitty." So the question here is, what word do you think best fits in the blank? And for this one, I want you to try to generate a word that you think would fit here on your own. And I don't want you to worry about, being right or wrong here. I just want you, without a word bank here, without multiple choice answers, just think, what word could fit in the blank here? Again, I don't care if you're right or wrong. I just want you to try to come up with your own word that would make sense here. So pause the video and try this now. So the correct answer here is disappointed, and if you got that, then you did a really fantastic job. It wasn't really clear that that would be the case here, and which is why I said I don't care if you're right or wrong here, because it would be really hard to guess that that was the right answer, right? I just wanted to get you thinking here, because the technique that we're using here is called closed deletion. It's I'm taking words out and I'm picking these words for a specific purpose, and the more that you practice this process called closed deletion, it's going to really help you to read better. This is a proven way to boost your reading comprehension. So it's like if you go to the gym, you don't always see progress right away. And the same thing here, you might not know that you're getting better at reading comprehension by doing this, but slowly and surely you will. And that's what the research says. Okay, so moving ahead here, it says, they went back along the gravel path and passed in the door. The maid stayed outside to close the blank. As the American girl passed the office, the padrone, I think I'm pronouncing that right, but I don't know Italian that well, so I'm just going to say the padrone, bowed from his desk. Something felt very small and tight inside the girl. The padrone made her feel very small and at the same time really important. She had a momentary feeling of being of supreme importance. So your next question is to pause the video and think which word most likely fits in the blank up there, and I'd like you to also think about why. So pause the video, think about it, and then we'll go over it. So the correct answer here is umbrella, and if you pick door though, then I can see why you would think that, which is why I wanted you to also tell me why and see if you could make an argument for this. But hopefully the reason you would know that it would be umbrella is because earlier in the story, you'd have to think back to where the maid actually gave her the umbrella when she first went outside. So another way to think about it would be, if the girl went in the door, is the maid going to go out and then close the door? Because then the maid would be shutting herself outside. So I don't know that I don't think that would make much sense for her to shut herself out in the rain. So that's why hopefully you would see umbrella. But if you pick D, you were on the right track too. I can definitely see why you picked that, so don't be discouraged. If you pick door, this is a tricky question, and I'm mainly concerned with you being able to also make an argument for why you thought the answer was right. So if you pick door, I'm interested in your thought process. It's the thought process and the critical thinking here that's more important than the result. Okay, so the next question, what do you think the word padrone means? And I'm sorry if you know Italian and I don't, and I'm pronouncing that wrong, but I'm just going to say padrone throughout the video because that's how it seems like it would make the most sense to me. But I'd like you to pause the video and I want you to tell me, what do you think the word padrone means? So the answer here is that it's the hotel owner, and a clue here would be the hotel owner, hotel keeper, same thing. But the answer here really is, hopefully you remember that he was behind the desk earlier in the story, and it says that the padrone bowed from his desk. And just hopefully you realize that this is the same character as that hotel keeper or owner. Okay, so it goes on to say, she went on up the stairs. She opened the door of the room. George was on the bed, reading. Did you get the cat? He asked, putting the book down. It was gone. Wonder where it went to, he said, resting his eyes from reading. She sat down on the bed. I wanted it so much, she said. I don't know why I wanted it so much. I wanted that poor kitty. It isn't any fun to be a poor kitty out in the rain. George was reading again. So your question here is, what is the best inference we can make from the last sentence and what we've learned so far about what the characters are like? So the last sentence is that George was reading sentence, so I'd like you to pause the video, try this out, and we'll go over it. So hopefully you saw that it's the inference that he doesn't pay enough attention to his wife, and this is just based off of what we know so far. This is because she's trying to talk to him about the cat and he's reading, just doesn't seem like he's paying that close of attention to her, and so hopefully that's the inference that you came. An inference, you're just using what you know from the story and also just thinking through with your own experience. So C was the correct answer here. So it goes on to say, she went over and sat in front of the mirror of the dressing table, looking at herself with the hand glass. She studied her profile, first one side and then the other. Then she studied the back of her head and her neck. So your question here is, the word profile most likely means which of the following? A, an account on Facebook. B, a short article that describes a company. C, an outline of something or someone as seen from the side. Or D, something you set up on a dating website. So pause the video, you know the drill, try this out, and then we'll go over it. So the correct answer here is C, an outline of something or someone as seen from the side. So there's really two different tricks here that are really important to know for the whole GED test, really. And the first one here is that as a last resort, let's say you were completely stumped on this, you had no idea and you had to guess, you would want to guess the longest answer. And it doesn't always work, there's no guarantee, but throughout most of the whole GED test, all right, as a last resort, if you are stuck and you have to guess anyway, know that the one that's most likely to be right is going to be the longest answer. Again, it doesn't always work, but the reason is because when the test writers make up the questions, they have to write one correct answer, and they usually write the correct answer first, and then they have to come up with a few fake answers, and it takes more effort to really go all out with the fake answers. So oftentimes they're not going to write as many words or write as long of a statement for the fake answers. So that's oftentimes how you can tell that an answer is right, just because it's longest and it's more specific. Again, there's no guarantee, that's not always the case, but it's a safe bet as a last resort. And the other trick here that I want you to see, and again, this is no guarantee, it doesn't work every time, but if you have to guess, this is a good trick to use, is to look for words in the answer choices that directly match in the passage. Like here we see it says first one side and then the other. And answer choice C says an outline of something or someone as seen from the side. And so that could be another clue if you had to guess that C was the correct answer. And so once you have a couple of these different guessing tricks, which I've given you two here, if you find an answer choice that has two of these things, like it's the longest answer and it also matches one of the, has a direct match between a word in the passage and a word that's in the answer choice itself, right? If you've got two of these things here, then it's even more likely that that answer choice is going to be correct, all right? Again, that's not always going to be the case. There's no guarantee, but if you're stuck and you have to guess, it's worth a try. So I've just kind of summed these up here on the slide, and I know that I talk kind of fast and go kind of fast sometimes, so I'm expecting that you can pause the video and take your time and read this, add anything you want to your notes, and then we'll keep going here. So the story goes on to say, "Don't you think it would be a good idea if I let my hair grow out?" she asked, looking at her profile again. George looked up and saw the back of her neck, clipped close like a boy's. "I like it the way it is." "I get so tired of it," she said. "I get so tired of looking like a boy." George shifted his position in the bed. He hadn't looked away from her since she started to speak. "You look pretty darn nice," he said. So your question, do you think this paragraph shows evidence that George doesn't pay enough attention to his wife, or that he does? Why or why not? There's no right or wrong answer, I just want you to think. Pause the video and then we'll go over it. So here, right, my thoughts would be, remember earlier when she was talking about the cat, right? He didn't even look up from his book. So from that, it seemed like the most logical inference would be that he doesn't pay enough attention to her, but especially because remember the hotel owner or the padrone, made her feel so special just by basically paying attention to her. And her husband, though, is now complimenting her and he is looking at her. So he is paying attention to her now. So this could be evidence that, hey, maybe he does pay attention to her, right? The author might also be trying to suggest that he only pays attention to her when it's something shallow like her appearance, all right? Maybe, maybe not, who knows? There's no right or wrong answer. I just wanted to just kind of get you some practice in just thinking critically and processing the text, because the more you process the text and think critically, the better off you're going to be as far as remembering stuff. And, I can almost guarantee really that if you've taken the time so far throughout this video to pause and try these critical thinking exercises, later on you're going to remember a lot more details from the story than you otherwise would have, all right? So hopefully you see that the more you think and ask questions about what you're reading, the more deeply you're going to understand and remember what you're reading, and this will hopefully help you get a better score when you do the actual test. Okay, so your next question says, who's speaking in the highlighted sentence? Is it the wife, is it the husband, the hotel owner, or is it the maid? Pause the video, try to figure this out, and then as always, we'll go over it. So the correct answer here is that it's the wife. And I just wanted to get you some practice here with understanding quotations. And really, the trick here is to see that where George talks, it's a new paragraph here. All right. And as a general rule of thumb, you want to understand that there's going to be a new paragraph whenever someone different is speaking. So I have the tip at the top here. A new paragraph starts whenever someone different is speaking. And I showed you this red arrow here just to show you that, hey, it's a new paragraph, someone new is talking, so just another way to help you keep track of who is talking in the dialogue. So the passage goes on to say, and I want to eat at a table with my own silver, and I want candles. And I want it to be spring, and I want to brush my hair out in front of a mirror, and I want a kitty, and I want some new clothes. Oh, shut up and get something to read, George said. He was reading again. His wife was looking out of the window. It was quite dark and still raining in the palm trees. So the question here is, does the new information learned in this paragraph portray George as a good or bad character? Pause the video, think about it, and we'll go over it. Okay, so the idea here is that he tells her to shut up, which is not nice, so I would say bad. And so here's another strategy to help you keep track of the characters. It's mentally dividing up characters into either good or bad. And so, in real life when you're reading stories, it's not always going to be so cut and dry like this. And in fact, in many cases here, it won't be, but in some cases it is. Like some big examples would be, think of Batman and the Joker, right? You know very clearly Batman's the good guy, Joker's the bad guy. That's really clear and obvious, so you can keep them apart very easily in your mind. Another one is in Star Wars, where you have Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. And then also just think about wrestling, WWE, and this isn't always the case. Sometimes they switch it up, but in a lot of good matches, especially the classics, there's one really, really well-defined character that's just really good, or the hero, and then they have the heel or the bad guy or the bad woman here. And so it helps you follow the story because you know who to cheer for and who to boo. And so some stories that you're going to read on the test are going to have a villain and a good person, but it's not always that straightforward. And so, for example, in this story, George says some mean things to her and he doesn't listen. So those are both bad things, right? But he also compliments her sometimes. So, and initially at the beginning of the story, he offered to go out and help her with the cat. So he does some good things and some bad things, right? Same with the wife, okay? So she has compassion for the cat, so she seems like a kind, caring person, but she also possibly romantically likes someone that's not her husband, which is obviously really, really bad, all right? And again, it's not crystal clear if she likes the hotel owner romantically, but it seems to suggest she's at least interested in him romantically. Of course, does not mean that she would ever act on that necessarily, but it seems like she might have some kind of crush on him, which is obviously bad because she's married. But, the point here is that it's not always straightforward here, but sometimes it is. And, the conflict, though, in other cases, it could not just be one person versus another. It could be something like a character has an internal conflict, like they're battling like an internal demon or something. Or it could also be a conflict against nature. But the takeaway here is that whenever possible, always note which characters are portrayed as good, which are portrayed as bad. I think it's really going to help you out. So to keep moving here, it goes on to say, anyway, I want a cat, she said. I want a cat. I want a cat now. If I can't have long hair or any fun, I can have a cat. George was not listening. He was reading his book. His wife looked out of the window where the light had come on in the square. Someone knocked at the door. So the question here is, the last sentence tells us that someone knocked at the door. Who do you think knocked at the door? There's no right or wrong answer. I'd just like you to pause the video and answer the question. So basically, the choices would be either the maid, the padrone, the cat, or some new character. So as long as you came up with one of these, I would say you were thinking along the right lines here. It wouldn't be the wife or the husband, most likely, because they're not going to knock on the door because they're in the room already. But we go on here, and it says, it's talking about the husband. He looked up from his book. In the doorway stood the maid. She held a big tortoiseshell cat pressed tight against her and swung down against her body. Excuse me, she said. The padrone asked me to bring this for the signora. I don't know how to say that in Italian, but you get my point. Question. Which of the following is most likely the theme of the story? So pause the video, answer this question, and then we'll go over it. So the correct answer here, before I reveal, we need to know what the theme actually is. So the theme is just the message of the story, and it's often a statement about human nature in general. So a theme and a main idea, they can be the same thing, they can be related, but that's not always the case. And here we're just talking about the theme. And so the choice here is C. People who are lonely need a feeling of connection. And you would hopefully have came to this conclusion because, well, part of the story involves her wanting to get the cat out of the rain, but the whole big theme or main idea of the story, or the message of the story, I should say, it's not all about adopting animals in need, all right? There's only one animal that's kind of adopted. We don't even know if it's really adopted here. Also, everyone should take a vacation to Italy at least once. That wasn't the point of the story to do that. We know that because it just talks about two Americans that are at a hotel. It does take place in Italy, but the setting is not really that key to understanding the theme here. And also, reading is a good way to pass time on vacation. That did happen throughout the story. The husband is reading a book on their vacation in Italy, but that's not the big message. And, this might not be the right answer necessarily, C. People who are lonely need a feeling of connection. To really know what the theme is, you'd have to ask the author of the story what he intended it to be, and unfortunately he's dead because this is an older story. But that's why the question says, which of the following is most likely the theme? So out of all of the choices, C is most likely to be correct. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for sticking with me here. I know this is a long video, but I really hope that this video was helpful for you here, and I just really appreciate you sticking with me throughout this entire video and reaching to the end of it. And I just really wish you the best luck on the GED test, and I just hope you and your families, have bigger and better things ahead.